My name is Harper Matthews, and I was exactly 3 steps away from becoming Harper Sinclair when my entire world shattered in front of 200 wedding guests. The video of that moment has been viewed over 10 million times. Maybe you've seen it. The one where the bride freezes mid-aisle as the groom's mother stands up and screams a secret that changed everything. What the cameras didn't capture was the web of lies that had been spinning around me for 2 years, or the dangerous men who would show up at my parents' door demanding payment for debts I knew nothing about. But most importantly, what that viral video doesn't show is how the worst moment of my life became my salvation, and why I'm grateful every single day that Margaret Sinclair found the courage to speak up when she did. But just before we move back to it, comment where you are watching from, and like and subscribe for more stories. The morning light filtered through the gauze curtains of the bridal suite, casting everything in a soft, dreamlike glow. I sat before the vanity mirror, watching as my reflection transformed into someone I barely recognized, a bride. Harper Matthews was about to become Harper Sinclair, and the thought sent butterflies careening through my stomach like tiny, excited birds. Hold still, Harper, or this eyeliner is going to make you look like a raccoon, my sister Emma laughed, steadying my chin with her hand. Around us, the suite buzzed with energy. Bridesmaids in silk robes clinking champagne glasses, my mother fussing with a train of my dress hanging on the door, and the photographer capturing every candid moment. It had been exactly 2 years since Daniel Sinclair walked into my life and turned everything upside down in the most wonderful way. 2 years since that charity gala where I'd been nursing a glass of mediocre wine, wondering why I'd let my boss convince me to attend another networking event. Then he appeared, tall, confident, with eyes that seemed to see right through the professional facade I wore like armor. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he'd said, appearing at my elbow with 2 fresh glasses of something that looked infinitely better than what I'd been drinking. "Is it that obvious?" I'd replied, accepting the glass gratefully. Only to someone who's equally desperate to escape. His smile had been conspiratorial, warm. Daniel Sinclair. And before you ask, yes, I'm here because my mother threatened to disown me if I didn't show up to support her foundation. That was Daniel, charming, self-deprecating, able to make me laugh within seconds of meeting me. By the end of that night, we'd abandoned the gala entirely, talking until 3 in the morning in a 24-hour diner, sharing stories over coffee and pie. Earth to Harper. My best friend Lily waved a hand in front of my face. "Where'd you go just now?" "Just thinking about how it all started," I said, smiling at the memory. "Well, save the nostalgia for the honeymoon. We need to get you into this dress." The dress. My mother had cried when we found it, a stunning A-line with delicate lace applique that seemed to float over silk organza. It had been perfect from the moment I tried it on, requiring only minor alterations. Now, as my bridesmaids helped me step into it, careful not to disturb my professionally styled updo, I felt the weight of the moment settling over me. "Has anyone seen Margaret?" my mother asked, glancing around the suite. I thought she'd want to be here for this. Margaret Sinclair, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. A knot formed in my stomach at the mention of her name. Throughout the wedding planning, she'd been distant. Not unkind, exactly, but there was something in the way she looked at me, like she was studying me, waiting for something. She said she had to check on the flowers, Emma offered, but even she sounded uncertain. I'd noticed Margaret's strange behavior intensifying over the past week. At the rehearsal dinner last night, she'd stood to give a speech, champagne glass trembling in her hand. She'd started strong, talking about Daniel as a baby, his first steps, his determination, even as a child. But then she'd paused, staring at me with an intensity that made the entire room shift uncomfortably. "Marriage it's built on truth," she'd said, her voice catching. "Without truth, there's nothing. Nothing at all." Then she'd simply sat down, leaving her toast unfinished, while Daniel's father had quickly stood to smooth over the awkward moment with his own jovial speech. "She's probably just emotional," Lily said, reading my expression. "Her only son is getting married. My mom cried for 3 days straight before my brother's wedding. But it wasn't just emotion I'd seen in Margaret's eyes. It was something else, something that looked dangerously close to fear. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Ladies, we need the bride in 10 minutes, the wedding coordinator called. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, I would walk down that aisle toward the man I loved. Daniel, who'd proposed on the rooftop of the building where we'd had our first official date. He'd arranged everything, a private dinner under the stars, a string quartet playing our song, rose petals scattered everywhere. When he dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, I'd said yes before he could even finish asking the question. "You look absolutely stunning," my father said when he saw me, his eyes misting. "Daniel is a lucky man." "Thanks, Dad," I whispered, taking his arm. The walk to the chapel felt both endless and too quick. Through the windows, I could see the space transformed into a fairy tale, white roses and baby's breath adorning every pew, candlelight flickering against the stained glass, creating patterns of colored light on the floor. 200 guests had gathered to witness our union, and as the wedding coordinator positioned us at the doors, I could hear the soft murmur of their conversations. "Ready, sweetheart?" Dad asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded, though my heart was racing so fast I wondered if everyone would be able to hear it over the music. The coordinator gave the signal, and the doors opened. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's canon, and every head turned toward us. There he was. Daniel stood at the altar, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, his smile bright enough to light the entire chapel. His brother stood beside him as best man, and the groomsmen were arranged in a perfect line. Everything was exactly as we'd rehearsed. I took my first step down the aisle, then another. The faces of our guests blurred into an impressionistic painting of smiles and tears. My focus narrowed to Daniel, to the way his eyes never left mine, to the slight nod he gave me as if to say, "We're really doing this." But something was wrong. In my peripheral vision, I saw Margaret in the front row, and she wasn't smiling. She was gripping the pew in front of her, her knuckles white, her face pale as paper. As I drew closer, I could see she was shaking. 5 more steps. 4. 3. Margaret suddenly stood up. "Stop." The word ripped through the chapel like a gunshot. Every muscle in my body froze mid-step, my foot hovering above the ground as if time itself had stuttered to a halt. Margaret Sinclair stood in the front row, her whole body trembling, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "Don't marry him." Her voice cracked with desperation. "Should I tell her what you're hiding before she says yes?" The chapel erupted. Gasps echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Someone dropped a program, the sound of paper hitting marble abnormally loud in the sudden chaos. I heard phones being pulled out, the subtle click of cameras, whispers spreading through the pews like wildfire. My bouquet shook in my hands. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not in front of everyone we knew. Daniel's face had drained of all color. The confident smile that had greeted me moments ago was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen before, pure, naked panic. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, no words coming out. "Margaret, what are you doing?" Daniel's father, Robert, hissed from his seat, reaching for his wife's arm. She yanked away from him with surprising force. "I'm doing what I should have done months ago." Margaret's voice rose, becoming stronger, more determined. "She deserves to know the truth." My chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. The bodice of my dress, which had fit perfectly moments ago, now seemed to squeeze the air from my lungs. I looked at Daniel, silently begging him to explain, to laugh it off, to tell me his mother was having some kind of breakdown. Instead, he rushed forward, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste. "She's confused," he said, his voice too loud, too desperate. "Mom's been under a lot of stress with the wedding planning. She's not well." But even as he spoke, I could see the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his hands trembled as he reached for me. This wasn't the reaction of a confused son dealing with an unwell mother. This was fear. "Don't lie to her." Margaret screamed, and the raw pain in her voice made everyone in the chapel flinch. Not here, not in God's house. She deserves better than your lies, Daniel. The whispers grew louder. I caught fragments of conversation. What's happening? Is this real? Someone should do something. My sister Emma had half risen from her bridesmaid position, looking between me and Margaret with alarm. The officiant, an elderly priest who'd married half the couples in town, took a careful step backward, his prayer book clutched to his chest. Even he seemed at a loss for protocol in this situation. Harper, Daniel said, reaching for my hands. His palms were clammy, slick with sweat. Please, let's just continue with the ceremony. We can sort this out later, as a family. As a family. The words should have been comforting, but they felt like another trap closing around me. Sort what out? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Then louder. Sort what out, Daniel? Nothing. There's nothing. Mom's just... He turned to glare at his mother. You're ruining everything. You're sick. You need help. Margaret shook her head slowly, deliberately. The only sick thing here is what you've done. What you're continuing to do. She looked directly at me then, and the sympathy in her eyes was almost worse than the chaos around us. Harper, sweetheart, you don't know the man you're marrying. Please, just listen to me before it's too late. My legs felt like water. The bouquet slipped from my numb fingers, white roses and baby's breath scattering across the aisle. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Our perfect day, literally falling apart at my feet. I grabbed handfuls of my dress, lifting the hem as I turned and ran toward the side door of the chapel. Behind me, I heard Daniel calling my name, heard the explosion of voices as our guests realized the bride was fleeing her own wedding. I burst into the small anteroom we'd used for last-minute touch-ups, slamming the door behind me. My reflection in the mirror was a mockery. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect dress, all dressed up for a wedding that was imploding spectacularly. Seconds later, the door opened. I spun around, expecting Daniel, but it was Margaret. She closed the door quietly behind her, leaning against it as if to bar anyone else from entering. Harper, she began, her voice gentler now, exhausted. I'm so sorry. I didn't want it to happen this way. I tried to talk to Daniel privately, tried to convince him to tell you himself, but he refused. He said it would all work out after you were married, that you'd understand. Understand what? My voice was shrill, hysterical. What is everyone talking about? What has he done? Margaret reached into her small clutch purse with shaking hands, pulling out an envelope. It was crumpled, as if she'd been carrying it around for days, wrestling with the decision to use it. He's been living another life, she said quietly. A life he's hidden from you, from everyone. There are debts, Harper. Massive debts from gambling, from bad investments he's hidden from his father's company. But that's not the worst of it. The door rattled as someone tried to open it. Daniel's voice came through, muffled but angry. Mom, open this door right now. Don't you dare. The worst of it, Margaret continued, raising her voice over her son's protests, is that he has another family. A woman and a child he's been supporting for 3 years. A child, Harper. A little boy who calls him Daddy. The world tilted. I reached for the wall to steady myself, my engagement ring catching the light. The ring that had belonged to Daniel's grandmother, he'd said. Was that a lie too? You're lying, I whispered, but even as I said it, pieces were clicking into place. The business trips that came up suddenly. The calls he took in private. The way he'd been so insistent that we have separate bank accounts until after the wedding. The door burst open, Daniel shouldering his way past his mother. His face was red, furious. She's lost her mind, he said immediately. None of this is true. Mom's been against us from the beginning. Then prove it, Margaret said simply, holding out the envelope to me. If I'm lying, then nothing in here should matter. Daniel lunged for the envelope, but I was faster, snatching it from Margaret's hand. Inside were bank statements with withdrawals I didn't recognize, photos that were slightly blurry but unmistakable. Daniel with a woman I'd never seen before, holding a toddler who had his eyes, his smile. That's not. Those are old. She's just a friend. Daniel's excuses tumbled over each other, each one less convincing than the last. The door opened again, and this time it was a crowd, my parents, his father, Emma, Lily, the wedding coordinator, all trying to squeeze into the small room. "Is the wedding happening or not?" someone asked. I looked at Daniel, at the man I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. He stood there in his perfect tuxedo, this stranger wearing my fiancé's face, and I realized that Margaret was right. I didn't know him at all. "I need everyone to leave," I heard myself say, my voice surprisingly steady. "Everyone except Margaret. Please." "Harper, don't do this," Daniel pleaded. "Don't let her poison you against me. We love each other. That's all that matters." "If you loved me," I said quietly, "you would have told me the truth." The room slowly emptied, people filing out with backward glances and whispered conversations. Daniel was the last to go, pausing at the doorway. "This isn't over," he said, and for the first time since I'd met him, it sounded like a threat. When we were alone, Margaret and I stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just happened settling over us like a shroud. "The boy's name is James," she said softly. "He's 3 years old. He has Daniel's laugh." I sank onto the small sofa in the corner, my wedding dress pooling around me like spilled milk. Through the door, I could hear the chaos continuing in the chapel, guests unsure whether to leave or stay, probably already posting about this disaster on social media. "What else?" I asked, surprised by how calm I sounded. "What else hasn't he told me, Margaret?" She sat beside me, this woman who should have been my mother-in-law, who had just saved me from a marriage built on lies. "I think," she said carefully, "that's a question only Daniel can fully answer. But Harper, whatever happens next, know that you deserve the truth. You deserved so much better than this." Outside, church bells began to ring, marking the hour when I should have been saying, "I do." Instead, I sat in a crumpled wedding dress, holding evidence of a betrayal I never saw coming, wondering how many other secrets were waiting to be discovered. The perfect beginning had become the perfect disaster, and as much as I wanted to wake up from this nightmare, I knew the worst was yet to come. The anteroom felt like it was shrinking around me. Margaret sat beside me on the small sofa, both of us still in our wedding finery, me in my ruined dream of a dress, her in the elegant navy blue mother-of-the-groom outfit she'd agonized over for weeks. The irony wasn't lost on me. We'd both dressed for a celebration that had become a catastrophe. "I need proof," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Real proof, Margaret. Not just blurry photos and bank statements that could mean anything. If I'm going to blow up my life, our lives, I need to know beyond any doubt that this is true." Margaret nodded, reaching into her purse again. This time, she pulled out her phone. "I have everything documented. I've been gathering evidence for months, trying to find the courage to tell you." Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through her photos. "I hired a private investigator. I'm not proud of it, but I had to know the truth about my own son." The door burst open before she could show me anything. Daniel stood there, his bow tie askew, his perfect composure completely shattered. Behind him, I could see guests craning their necks, trying to see the drama unfolding. "Enough," he shouted, slamming the door behind him. "Mother, you've made your point. You've successfully destroyed my wedding. Are you happy now?" "Happy." Margaret stood slowly, facing her son with a dignity I hadn't expected. "You think this makes me happy? Watching my son lie to everyone he claims to love? Knowing what you've become? What I've become?" Daniel laughed, but it was an ugly sound, nothing like the warm laughter that had made me fall in love with him. "I became exactly what you and Dad raised me to be. Successful. Ambitious. Someone who gets what he wants." "We didn't raise you to be a liar," Margaret shot back. "Didn't you?" Daniel's voice dropped dangerously low. "Every dinner party where we pretended to be the perfect family? Every time Dad's affairs were swept under the rug? Every time you told me to keep quiet about the family's dirty secrets? You taught me that appearance is everything, Mother. Don't act shocked that I learned the lesson." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my fiancé's face. Your father had affairs? Daniel turned to me, his expression shifting instantly to something softer, more pleading. That's not. Harper, that has nothing to do with us. Mom's trying to confuse you, to make this about old family drama. No, Margaret said firmly. I'm trying to prevent Harper from making the same mistake I did. I stayed silent for 30 years, Daniel. I won't watch another woman go through that. You need to leave, Daniel said to his mother, his jaw clenched.
Now.
I'm not going anywhere without Harper, Margaret replied. The tension in the room was suffocating. I stood up, the weight of my dress suddenly unbearable. Both of you, stop. Just stop. I turned to Daniel. I need you to answer one simple question.
Just one.
Do you have a child with another woman? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Daniel's face cycled through emotions, anger, calculation, desperation, before finally settling on something that looked almost like resignation. It's complicated, he said finally. Those two words shattered whatever was left of my heart. Complicated, I repeated numbly. Having a child with someone else while we were together is complicated. We weren't together when it happened, he said quickly. It was during that break we took, remember? 3 years ago, when you said you needed space to figure things out. I thought back to that time. We'd been dating for 6 months, and I'd gotten scared by how fast things were moving. I'd asked for a 2-week break to clear my head. 2 weeks. You had a child with someone during a 2-week break? My voice was rising, becoming shrill. And you never thought to mention it? Not when we got back together. Not when you proposed. Not once during the entire wedding planning. I was going to tell you, Daniel said, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. After the honeymoon, when things were settled. I laughed, and it sounded hysterical even to my own ears. You mean when it would be harder for me to leave? When you'd understand that it didn't change anything between us, he corrected. The child, James, he's taken care of. Financial support, everything. You'd never have to deal with it. Deal with it? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's your son, not an inconvenient business transaction. Margaret pulled out a manila folder from her purse. How much evidence had she brought? And handed it to me. The boy's birth certificate, she said quietly. Daniel is listed as the father. He signed it. I opened the folder with numb fingers. There it was in black and white. James Daniel Morrison. Father, Daniel Robert Sinclair. The date of birth put conception exactly during our break. Who is she? I asked, not looking up from the paper. The mother? Her name is Rebecca Morrison. Margaret answered when Daniel remained silent. She was a bartender at that resort in Miami where Daniel went during your break. Miami. He'd said he was going there for a business conference. Another lie? Or had the conference been real and Rebecca just a side story he'd never intended to continue? She's nobody, Daniel said quickly. Just a mistake. She's the mother of your child. I threw the birth certificate at him. It fluttered to the ground between us like a white flag of surrender. Your son's mother is not nobody. A knock at the door interrupted us. Harper. It was Lily's voice. Honey, are you okay? Should I call the police? We're fine. I called back, though fine was the last thing we were. Just give us a few more minutes. The guests are leaving, Lily said through the door. Your dad is trying to handle things, but it's chaos out here. Of course it was. 200 people had just witnessed the bride run from her own wedding. This would be the gossip of the century in our social circle. My phone, tucked into the hidden pocket of my dress, had been vibrating nonstop. I could only imagine the texts and calls I was getting. Show me the financial records, I said to Margaret, suddenly exhausted. All of it. She handed me another folder. This one was thicker, filled with bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents. As I flipped through them, my stomach sank lower and lower. Withdrawals of thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands, all to accounts I didn't recognize. Cash advances on credit cards I didn't know existed. The gambling started 2 years ago, Margaret explained. He thought he could make quick money to cover the child support without anyone finding out. But gambling debts led to more gambling, which led to loans from some very dangerous people. How dangerous? I looked at Daniel, who had gone pale. They're businessmen, he said weakly. It's under control. Under control? Margaret's voice was sharp. They came to the house, Daniel. Men in dark suits came to your father's house looking for you. Thank God Robert wasn't home. They came to your parents' house. I couldn't process this. The Daniel I knew was careful with money, conservative even. We'd spent hours planning our financial future together, talking about savings and investments and college funds for our future children. How much do you owe? Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Including everything? About $300,000. I sank back onto the sofa. $300,000. We'd been planning to buy a house after the honeymoon. Had he been planning to use my savings to pay off his debts? There's more, Margaret said gently. More. I laughed, but it came out as more of a sob. What could possibly be worse? He's been fired from the firm. I looked at Daniel sharply. You told me you got promoted last month. We celebrated. You bought champagne. I was going to fix it, Daniel said desperately. I have job interviews lined up. You never had to know. When? I interrupted. When were you fired? 6 weeks ago.
6 weeks.
He'd been pretending to go to work for 6 weeks. Getting dressed in his suit every morning, kissing me goodbye, coming home with fake stories about his day. The level of deception was staggering.
Why?
I asked. Why were you fired? Daniel's jaw clenched. Internal politics. It wasn't my fault. Margaret sighed. He was caught using the company credit card for personal expenses. Gambling expenses, specifically. They gave him the option to resign quietly instead of pressing charges. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, to do something with the nervous energy coursing through me. My wedding dress swished around me as I paced the small room. So, let me see if I have this straight. You have a 3-year-old son you never told me about. You owe $300,000 to potentially dangerous people. You've been fired from your job and have been lying about it for 6 weeks. Am I missing anything? The apartment, Margaret said quietly. What apartment? I spun to face her. He's been keeping an apartment downtown. For Rebecca and James. I looked at Daniel. You've been paying for an apartment? While we've been living together. While we've been planning our future? She needed somewhere safe to live, he said defensively. I couldn't just abandon them. But you could lie to me about them? I was shouting now, and I didn't care. You could stand at that altar and promise to love and honor me while hiding an entire other life? I do love you. Daniel moved toward me, but I backed away. Harper, none of this changes how I feel about you. You're the one I chose. You're the one I want to spend my life with. Your love comes with a price tag of $300,000 and a secret family, I said. That's not love, Daniel. That's manipulation. The door opened again, and this time it was Robert, Daniel's father. He looked between the three of us, his expression grim. The chapel is empty. The guests have all left. We need to decide how to handle this situation before it gets any worse. Worse. I laughed bitterly. How could it possibly get worse? Robert's expression was cold as he looked at his wife. Margaret, you've done enough damage. We'll discuss your betrayal of this family later. My betrayal? Margaret's voice was incredulous. Our son has been lying to everyone, and you're concerned about my betrayal? You aired our private business in front of 200 people, Robert said. There were better ways to handle this. I tried the better ways. Margaret shot back. I begged Daniel to tell Harper the truth. I tried to talk to you, but you wouldn't listen. You never listen when it comes to Daniel's faults. Because I understand that men sometimes make mistakes, Robert said, and the way he said it made my skin crawl. Harper, Daniel is a good man who made some poor choices. Marriage is about forgiveness, about working through problems together. Problems? I stared at him. You call this a problem? Your son has been living a double life. And you're being dramatic, Robert said dismissively. The child situation can be handled discreetly. The debts can be managed through the family trust. No one outside this room needs to know the details. The family trust, I repeated. You're going to pay off his gambling debts? It's an investment in his future, Robert said. In your future together. I looked at Daniel, who had the grace to look ashamed. You knew, didn't you? You knew your father would bail you out if things got bad enough. It's not like that, Daniel started, but I held up my hand to stop him. Yes, it is. It's exactly like that. You've been gambling, literally gambling, with our future because you knew Daddy would clean up your mess. The weight of my ruined wedding dress felt like armor now, protecting me from the full impact of what was happening. I stood in the center of a small room, surrounded by the Sinclair family, and for the first time, I saw them clearly. Really saw them. Robert Sinclair, in his expensive suit, treating his son's catastrophic deceptions like a minor inconvenience to be managed. Margaret, finally finding her voice after years of silence, but still trembling under her husband's disapproval. And Daniel, my Daniel, except he wasn't mine at all, was he? He belonged to a web of lies, so complex I was only beginning to understand its scope. Harper, Daniel said, reaching for my hand. I jerked away, and he flinched. Please, just let me explain everything. From the beginning. The beginning? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. When was the beginning, Daniel? When you met Rebecca.
When you started gambling.
When you decided I was too stupid to handle the truth. I never thought you were stupid, he said quickly. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? My voice rose again. From what? From making an informed decision about my own life. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. This time I pulled it out, needing the distraction. Dozens of messages filled the screen. From my parents, my sister, friends, co-workers who'd been at the wedding. But one stood out, an unknown number with a Miami area code.
I'm sorry.
You deserve to know the truth. Rebecca. I held up the phone to Daniel. She's texting me. Your other woman is texting me at my wedding. Daniel's face went white. She shouldn't have your number. How does she have your number? I gave it to her, Margaret said quietly. Yesterday. I hoped maybe she could convince you to tell Harper the truth before today. You've been conspiring with her? Daniel turned on his mother, his face twisted with rage. You brought that woman into this? That woman, Margaret said firmly, is raising your son. She deserves more respect than you've ever shown her. I looked at the text again. Rebecca. She had a name. She was real. This was all real. Call her, I said suddenly. Everyone looked at me.
What?
Daniel asked. Call Rebecca.
Right now.
I want to talk to her. That's not a good idea, Robert interjected. Harper, you're emotional. This isn't the time. This is exactly the time, I said, my voice steady. I'm standing here in my wedding dress in a room full of people who've been lying to me. I want to hear from the one person who might tell me the truth. She's nobody, Daniel said desperately. She's just. If she's nobody, then it shouldn't matter if I talk to her. I held out my phone to him. Call her. Daniel stared at the phone like it was a snake. I don't have her number memorized. Another lie. I could see it in his eyes, the way they shifted away from mine. Margaret pulled out her own phone. I have it. Mother, don't. But she was already dialing, putting it on speaker. The room fell silent as it rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello. The voice was soft, tentative.
Young.
Rebecca. Margaret said. It's Margaret Sinclair. I'm here with Harper. There was a pause. Oh God. You told her? At the altar, I said, my voice cracking. She told me at the altar. Harper, I'm so sorry, Rebecca said, and she sounded like she meant it. I told Daniel he needed to tell you. I've been telling him for months. Months. I looked at Daniel. She's been telling you for months? Since you got engaged, Rebecca continued. I saw the announcement in the paper. That's when I realized he was never going to leave you. That all his promises were lies. What promises? My legs felt weak again. Daniel lunged for the phone, but Margaret pulled it away. Don't you dare, she told her son. He said you two were basically over. Rebecca's voice continued through the speaker. That you were only together for appearances for your families. He said once he got his trust fund access at 30, he'd leave you, and we'd be together. A real family. Trust fund. Another thing I hadn't known about. I looked at Robert, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. He gets a $5 million trust fund on his 30th birthday, Robert explained. In 2 months. 2 months. We'd scheduled the wedding specifically so we'd be married before his birthday. I'd thought it was romantic, wanting to enter his 30s as a married man. But it was about money. It was always about money. The prenup, I said suddenly remembering. You insisted on a prenup to protect your trust fund. That's standard, Daniel said quickly. You understood that. I understood you were protecting premarital assets. I didn't understand you were about to come into $5 million that I'd have no claim to if we divorced. Harper, Rebecca's voice came through the phone again. There's something else you should know. Rebecca, don't, Daniel warned. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Margaret gasped. Robert cursed under his breath. Daniel just closed his eyes. How far along? I heard myself ask, my voice surprisingly calm. For months. For months. While we were tasting wedding cakes and choosing flower arrangements, Daniel had been creating another child with another woman. You knew, I said to Daniel. You knew she was pregnant, and you were still going to marry me. It doesn't change anything, he said, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. It changes everything, I screamed. You have 2 children with another woman. 2 children you were planning to hide from me our entire marriage. I was going to tell you. When? I demanded. After the first kid? After the second? On our 25th anniversary? When exactly were you planning to mention your secret family? Rebecca spoke again. He told me the wedding was called off. 3 weeks ago, he said you'd broken up and the wedding was off. 3 weeks ago, we'd been finalizing the seating chart. We'd been practicing our first dance. We'd been making love, and he'd whispered that he couldn't wait to call me his wife. I have the texts, Rebecca continued. I can send them to you. All of them. Every promise he made. Every lie he told. That's enough, Robert said sharply. He grabbed Margaret's phone and ended the call. This has gone far enough. No, I said. It hasn't gone nearly far enough. I turned to Daniel. The locked drawer in your study. What's in it? Daniel's face, already pale, went gray. Nothing important. Then open it, Harper. Open it, or I call Rebecca back and ask her to send me everything. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys with shaking hands. He removed a small key from the ring and held it out to me. It's just financial documents. Nothing you need to worry about. I took the key. It was warm from his pocket, such a small thing to hold such big secrets. Where's the drawer? In his apartment, Margaret said. In the desk in his home office. Our apartment. Our home office. The room where he'd supposedly been working on briefs and case files while I made dinner. The room where I'd brought him coffee during late nights, kissing his forehead and telling him not to work too hard. We're going there, I said. Right now. Harper, be reasonable, Robert said. You're in your wedding dress. The media might be there. We need to manage this situation carefully. I don't care about managing the situation, I said. I care about the truth. I headed for the door, my dress rustling with each step. Behind me, I heard them following, Daniel, Margaret, Robert, all of them trailing after me like some perverse wedding processional. The chapel was indeed empty, but the evidence of our destroyed wedding was everywhere. Overturned programs, abandoned bouquets, my wedding cake still standing at the reception hall entrance, 3 tiers of white fondant and sugar roses mocking me with their perfection. Lily was waiting by the door, my car keys in her hand. I figured you'd need these, she said, pressing them into my palm. Your parents took your dad's car. They wanted to give you space. Thank you, I whispered. Do you want me to come with you? I looked back at the Sinclair family. No. This is something I need to do myself. The drive to our apartment, my apartment, I corrected myself, since apparently nothing about our life together was real, was surreal. Still in my wedding dress, driving through downtown while people stared and pointed. Daniel had tried to get in the car with me, but I'd locked the doors. He was following in his own car, his parents with him. The apartment building's doorman did a double take when he saw me. Mrs. Sinclair? I mean, miss, congratulations on your... Thank you, Tom. I said, not bothering to correct him or explain.
What would I say?
Actually, the wedding was called off when I found out my fiancé has a secret family. I took the elevator to our floor, the 10th floor, where we'd lived for the past year in what I thought was blissful domesticity. The apartment door was exactly as I'd left it this morning, when I'd been a different person living a different life. I went straight to the office. The desk was a massive oak piece that Daniel had inherited from his grandfather. The locked drawer was on the bottom right. I inserted the key and turned it. The drawer was packed with documents, photos, letters. I pulled them out in handfuls, spreading them across the desk. Bank statements for accounts I'd never seen. Loan documents from various sources, some with interest rates that made my stomach turn. Photos of Rebecca and James, dozens of them, documenting a life I knew nothing about. The boy at the park, at the beach, on Daniel's lap, at what looked like a birthday party. Harper. Daniel stood in the doorway, his parents behind him. Please let me explain. I held up one of the photos. Daniel holding James, both of them laughing, wearing matching baseball caps. Explain this. I love my son, he said simply. Is that a crime? No, I said. But lying to me about him is. I kept digging through the drawer. More documents. Legal papers. And then, at the very bottom, a small velvet box. Not a ring box. Longer, flatter. I opened it. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a charm that read, Rebecca and Daniel forever. You bought her jewelry? I looked at him, genuinely amazed at the depth of his deception. You bought another woman jewelry while we were engaged? It was for James, he said quickly, to gift his mother when he's older. Another lie. The receipt was still in the box, dated 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before our wedding. Margaret moved past her husband and son, coming to stand beside me. She picked up one of the bank statements. This account has regular transfers. Weekly. $15,000 a week for the past 6 months. $15,000 a week. I did the math quickly. That's over $300,000. That's separate from your gambling debts. Daniel's silence was answer enough. Where did you get that money? I asked. It doesn't matter, Robert said. What matters is moving forward. It does matter. I spun to face him. Where did the money come from, Daniel?
He wouldn't look at me.
Various sources. Margaret gasped, looking at another paper. Daniel, you didn't. Tell me you didn't. Didn't what? I grabbed the paper from her. It was a loan document. The collateral listed was, you mortgaged your parents' vacation home? They never use it, Daniel said defensively. Without telling us? Robert's composure finally cracked. You forged our signatures? I was going to pay it back. With the trust fund money. The trust fund you weren't going to get for 2 more months, I pointed out. What if they'd called the loan before then? They wouldn't. What if they had? Daniel's jaw clenched. Then I would have handled it.
How?
By stealing more money? By forging more signatures? By telling more lies? I looked around the office, at the life we'd built together. The diplomas on the wall, his from law school, mine from my master's program. The photo from our trip to Paris, where he'd first said he loved me. The engagement photo we'd used for our save the dates. All of it was built on lies. I need you all to leave, I said quietly. Harper. Daniel started. Get out. My voice was stronger now. Get out of my apartment. Our apartment, he corrected.
No.
I pulled out my phone, scrolling to find the lease agreement I'd photographed for our records. My apartment. My name is the only one on the lease because your credit was mysteriously bad when we moved in. Another red flag I ignored. My things. You can arrange to get them later. With supervision. I looked at Robert. I assume you'll want to handle this quietly. No police involvement, no lawyers. Robert nodded slowly. That would be best for everyone. Then get your son out of here before I change my mind and call both. Margaret was the last to leave. She paused at the door, looking back at me.
I'm sorry, Harper.
For all of it. For not speaking up sooner. For raising a son who could do this. For everything. Did you know about the second pregnancy? I asked. She shook her head. I only knew about James and the debts. If I'd known about the new baby, she trailed off. I would have found a way to tell you sooner. I promise you that. After they left, I stood in the silence of the apartment. Our apartment. My apartment. The place where Daniel had made me breakfast in bed. Where we'd slow danced in the kitchen. Where we'd planned our future, our children, our life together. I walked to the bedroom, still in my wedding dress, and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. My makeup had run, leaving dark streaks down my cheeks. My hair, so carefully styled this morning, was a mess. The dress, my beautiful, perfect dress, looked like a costume now, like I'd been playing dress-up in someone else's life. I reached for the zipper, then stopped. There was one more thing I needed to do. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Rebecca's text. Before I could lose my nerve, I typed back, "Send me everything." The response was almost immediate. Screenshots started flooding in. Texts from Daniel promising to leave me. Promises to be a real family. Declarations of love. Plans for their future together. And worse, so much worse, were his messages about me. How I was cold. Controlling. How he was only marrying me for my connections in the legal world, my family's reputation. One text, sent just last night while we were supposed to be at our rehearsal dinner, stood out. After tomorrow, everything changes. Once I have access to the trust fund and Harper's savings, we can disappear. Just you, me, James, and our new baby. The life we deserve. He'd been planning to leave me, to take my money and run. The wedding wasn't the beginning of our life together. It was meant to be his escape plan. I sank onto the bed, my wedding dress pooling around me, and finally, I let myself cry. Not delicate tears, but body-shaking sobs that felt like they were ripping me apart from the inside. The man I loved didn't exist. He never had. Daniel Sinclair was a fiction, a character he'd played to get what he wanted. And I'd fallen for it completely. My phone rang. "Lily. Honey, where are you? Your parents are worried sick." "I'm home," I said, though the word felt foreign now. "I'm at the apartment. I'm coming over." "Lily. I'm already in my car. You're not going through this alone." I looked around the bedroom, at the wedding gifts piled in the corner that we'd planned to open after our honeymoon. At Daniel's tuxedo jacket thrown over the chair where he'd left it this morning when he'd gone to get ready with his groomsmen. At the plane tickets to Bali on the nightstand, our honeymoon that would never happen. "Bring wine," I said to Lily. "Lots of wine." "Already in the trunk," she replied. "And ice cream. And tissues. And a baseball bat in case we need to smash things." Despite everything, I almost smiled. "I love you." "Love you too, babe. Be there in 10. I hung up and looked at my reflection again. Harper Matthews, I'd never become Harper Sinclair, thank God, stared back at me. Broken, deceived, humiliated, but still standing. Still here. I thought about Margaret's words at the altar. She deserves the truth. Yes, I did. I deserved the truth, and now I had it. Every ugly, painful piece of it. Daniel had a son he'd hidden from me. Another baby on the way. Debts that could destroy him. A plan to steal from me and disappear. The truth was agony, but it was also freedom. I reached for the zipper of my dress again, ready to shed this costume of a life that was never real. As I did, one more text came through from Rebecca. "I'm sorry this happened to you, but I'm glad you found out. He would have destroyed you like he destroyed me. At least now you can walk away." Walk away. Yes, that's exactly what I was going to do. Walk away from the lies, the manipulation, the carefully constructed fiction of our relationship. But first, I had a wedding dress to get out of, and a life to rebuild from the ashes of this spectacular disaster. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face at the altar, that perfect, lying smile that had fooled me for 2 years. Lily had stayed over, passing out on the couch around 3 a.m. after we'd gone through 2 bottles of wine and every single text message Rebecca had sent. I envied her ability to escape into unconsciousness. My mind wouldn't stop racing, replaying every moment, every conversation, searching for the signs I'd missed. I sat in the living room, still wearing my wedding dress because I couldn't bear to take it off. Taking it off meant accepting this was real, that my wedding day had actually ended with me discovering my fiancé's secret family and criminal activities. The dress had become a strange sort of armor, protecting me from the full reality of my situation. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Daniel. He'd been calling and texting all night. Harper, please.
We need to talk.
I can explain everything. You're not being rational. Don't throw away what we have. I love you. Rebecca means nothing. Answer your phone. Please. The latest one was different. My father wants to meet with you. He has a proposition. I stared at that last message. A proposition. Like this was a business deal gone wrong that could be fixed with the right terms. The Sinclair way, throw money at the problem until it disappears. A knock at the door made me jump. It was 6 a.m. Who would be here at 6 a.m.? I looked through the peephole. Robert Sinclair stood in the hallway, looking immaculate despite the early hour. Of course. When he said he wanted to meet, he meant on his timeline. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Robert. His eyes took in my appearance, still in my wedding dress, makeup smeared, hair a disaster. Harper. May I come in?
No.
He sighed. I have a check for $500,000 in my pocket. I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. $500,000. More than enough to cover Daniel's debts and then some. Blood money, I realized. Hush money. 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside. He entered, his eyes scanning the apartment, probably calculating its value, determining how much it would cost to make me disappear from his son's life. He sat on the armchair across from the couch where Lily was still sleeping. Daniel made mistakes, he began. Mistakes. I laughed, but quietly, not wanting to wake Lily. He has 2 children with another woman. He stole money. He forged signatures. Those aren't mistakes, Robert. Those are crimes. Crimes that could ruin him, Robert agreed. And you. The scandal of this wedding will follow you for years. Every potential employer, every future romantic partner will Google you and find stories about the bride who was left at the altar because her fiancé had a secret family. He wasn't wrong. I'd already seen the social media posts. Someone had recorded video of Margaret's outburst. It had already been shared hundreds of times. But it doesn't have to be that way, Robert continued, pulling out an envelope. $500,000. Sign an NDA. Tell everyone you called off the wedding due to cold feet. Daniel will do the same. The story dies, and you walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you want. I stared at the envelope. $500,000. Enough to pay off my student loans, buy a house, start the consulting firm I'd always dreamed about. All I had to do was let Daniel get away with it. Let him move on to his next victim. What about Rebecca? I asked. What about his children? They'll be taken care of, Robert said dismissively. They always have been. Through Daniel's lies and stolen money. Through family resources, Robert corrected. The method doesn't matter. The result does. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but then it immediately called again. Excuse me, I said to Robert, answering it. Hello. Is this Harper Matthews? The voice was professional, clinical. Yes. This is Dr. Chen from Presbyterian Hospital. You're listed as Daniel Sinclair's emergency contact. He's been admitted. What? I stood up, my heart racing. Despite everything, my first instinct was worry. Is he okay? What happened? He was brought in about an hour ago. Apparent overdose. He's stable now, but he's asking for you. I looked at Robert, whose face had gone pale. He'd heard enough to understand. I'll be right there, I said, hanging up. What did he do? Robert's voice was strained. Overdose, I said, already looking for my keys. He's stable, but... This is manipulation, Lily said, suddenly awake. Harper, this is exactly what manipulators do when they're losing control. Don't fall for it. But I was already moving toward the door. Robert followed. I'll drive, he said. The ride to the hospital was silent except for Robert making phone calls to his lawyer, his wife, Daniel's brother. I sat in the passenger seat of his Mercedes, still in my wedding dress, watching the sunrise over the city. Less than 24 hours ago, I'd been getting ready to marry Daniel. Now I was rushing to his hospital bedside. The hospital smell hit me the moment we walked through the emergency room doors, that distinctive mixture of disinfectant and fear that made my stomach turn. A nurse led us to a private room where Daniel lay in a bed, hooked up to various monitors, looking pale but conscious. Margaret was already there, sitting in a chair beside the bed, holding his hand. She looked up when we entered, her eyes red from crying. "It wasn't an overdose," she said immediately. "Tell her, Daniel. Tell her the truth." Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, please. No more lies." Margaret's voice was sharp. "You promised. When they pumped your stomach, you promised no more lies." "What are you talking about?" I moved closer to the bed, my dress rustling against the medical equipment. Daniel finally looked at me. Without his usual confident demeanor, he looked younger, almost vulnerable. "They came to my apartment last night. The men I owe money to. They forced me to take the pills. Said it was a warning." "They tried to kill you?" My voice came out as a whisper. "No," Daniel said. "They were very specific about the dose. Enough to hospitalize me, not enough to kill me. They said next time they'd visit you." The room spun. I grabbed the rail of his bed to steady myself. "They threatened me?" "They know about your savings," Daniel continued, his voice flat. "They know about your parents' retirement fund. They know where your sister lives. They know everything because I told them. I gave them everyone's financial information as collateral." "You did what?" Robert's voice was deadly quiet. "I was desperate," Daniel said. "I thought I could win it back. I was so close so many times. But the house always wins, right?" He laughed bitterly. I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. "My parents? Emma? You put them all at risk." "I can fix it," Daniel said quickly. "The trust fund." "The trust fund you don't get for 2 months," I interrupted. "What happens when they come back before then?" Silence. "How much?" I asked. "The real number. Not what you told me yesterday." Daniel closed his eyes. 800,000. With interest. 800. Robert cut himself off, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "You told us 300. I thought I could handle the rest," Daniel said weakly.
My phone rang.
It was my father. With shaking hands, I answered. "Harper, honey, are you okay? There's a man here at the house. He says he needs to talk to you about Daniel's debts. Should I call the police?" "No," Daniel said, having heard my father's voice. "If you involve the police, they'll—" He stopped, but we all knew what he meant. "They'd hurt someone." "Dad, don't open the door. I'll handle it. Just stay inside, okay?" "Harper, what's going on?" "I'll explain later. Please, just trust me." I hung up and looked at Daniel. "Fix this.
Now."
"I need the money first." "From where?" I stood up, anger overtaking fear. "Your father's check won't cover it. My savings won't cover it." "So where?" Margaret spoke quietly. "I have it." We all turned to look at her. "My inheritance from my mother," she continued. "I never told Robert about all of it. I have 900,000 in an account in Switzerland. I can wire it today." "Margaret," Robert started, but she cut him off. "It's my money. My decision." She looked at Daniel. "But there are conditions." "Anything," Daniel said quickly. "You sign over full custody of James to Rebecca. You enter rehab for gambling addiction. You have no contact with Harper ever again. And you tell the truth, all of it, to everyone we know. No NDA, no cover story. You own what you did." "Mom, I can't." "Then I let them come for you," Margaret said simply. "Your choice." I watched this play out like a scene from someone else's life. This couldn't be real. But then my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "There's a man outside my apartment. Harper, I'm scared." "Do it," I told Daniel. "Sign whatever she wants. Just make them stop." Daniel nodded, defeated. Margaret pulled out her phone and made a call. Within minutes, She was transferring money, speaking in rapid French to someone at a bank. "It's done," she said after what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes. "The money will be in their account within the hour." Daniel made his own call then, his voice subdued as he confirmed the transfer and begged them to leave our families alone. When he hung up, he looked hollow.
"They're gone," he said.
"It's over." But it wasn't over. Not even close. A knock at the door interrupted us. A woman entered, pretty, with dark hair and tired eyes. She was holding the hand of a small boy who had Daniel's eyes, Daniel's smile. "Rebecca. The nurse said you were awake," she said to Daniel, then noticed the rest of us. Her eyes widened when she saw me in my wedding dress. "Oh my God. Harper.
"I'm so sorry."
I didn't know you'd be here." "It's okay," I heard myself say, though nothing about this was okay. The little boy, James, broke free from his mother's hand and ran to Daniel's bed. "Daddy, the nurse said you were sick. Did you eat too much candy?" "Mommy says too much candy makes you sick." Daniel's face crumpled. He pulled James up onto the bed, holding him tight. "Yeah, buddy. Something like that." I watched them together, father and son, the family Daniel had hidden from me. James chattered about his toy dinosaurs, completely unaware of the devastation around him. Rebecca stood awkwardly by the door, one hand on her pregnant belly. "When's the baby due?" I asked her, needing to fill the silence with something.
"December," she said.
"It's a girl." A girl. Daniel would have a daughter. 2 children who would grow up knowing their father was a liar and a thief. "I have the custody papers," Rebecca said, pulling documents from her purse. "My lawyer drafted them this morning when Margaret called." This morning. Margaret had been planning this since yesterday, I realized. She'd known Daniel would need leverage to agree to her terms. Daniel signed the papers without reading them, his hand shaking. When he handed them back to Rebecca, she looked at me. "I know you probably hate me." "I don't hate you," I interrupted. "You were lied to just like I was." "He told me you were separated," she said. "For months, he told me you were separated. I only found out the truth when I saw your engagement announcement. By then, I was already pregnant with this one." She touched her belly again. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I tried. I sent you a message on Facebook months ago, but it must have gone to your spam folder. Then Margaret found me, and she said she'd handle it. I hoped she could convince Daniel to tell you himself." My spam folder. I thought of all the messages I'd ignored, dismissed as random noise. One of them had been a warning that could have saved me from this humiliation. "I should go," Rebecca said, taking James's hand. "Come on, baby. Daddy needs to rest." "But I don't want to go," James protested. "We'll come back tomorrow," Rebecca lied smoothly. According to the papers Daniel had just signed, he wouldn't see James again until the boy was 18, and only then if James wanted to see him. After they left, the room fell silent again. Robert stood by the window, looking out at the city. Margaret sat beside Daniel, not holding his hand anymore, but not leaving either. And I stood there in my ruined wedding dress, feeling like a ghost at my own funeral. "The real truth," I said suddenly. "I want to hear it. All of it. From the beginning." Daniel looked at me, exhausted. "Harper, you owe me that much." He nodded slowly, then began to talk. The truth was worse than I'd imagined. The gambling had started in college, small bets on sports games. He'd been good at it, or lucky, winning more than he lost. It became a rush, an addiction he fed in secret. By law school, he was betting thousands on single games, using student loan money, credit cards, anything he could get his hands on. He'd met Rebecca during a particularly bad streak. He'd lost $50,000 in a weekend and had gone to Miami to clear his head. She was bartending at his hotel. She was kind, uncomplicated, nothing like the high-pressure world he lived in. When I'd asked for a break in our relationship, he'd run straight to her, seeking that simplicity again. "But I loved you," he said, looking at me. "I do love you. You were everything I wanted to be, successful, ethical, stable. When I was with you, I could pretend I was that person too. So I was what your beard, Your cover story for being a decent human being? No. You were my chance at redemption. I thought if I could be the man you deserved, maybe I could leave all the rest behind. But you couldn't. The debts were too big. And then James happened, and Rebecca needed support, and the only way to get money fast was to gamble more. It's a spiral, Harper. Once you're in, you can't get out. You could have asked for help, Margaret said quietly. We would have helped you. Would you? Daniel looked at his father. Would you have helped Dad? Or would you have lectured me about weakness and failure and how Sinclairs don't make these kinds of mistakes? Robert didn't answer, which was answer enough. I need to leave, I said suddenly. The walls were closing in, the hospital smell was making me nauseous, and I couldn't stand to look at Daniel's face for another second. Harper, wait, Daniel called as I reached the door. I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know, it wasn't all lies. The way I felt about you, that was real. I turned back to look at him one last time. No, Daniel, it wasn't. Real love doesn't come with conditions. Real love doesn't require lies to survive. Real love doesn't put everyone around it in danger. What you felt for me was possession, maybe obsession, but it wasn't love. So that's it, he asked. 2 years just gone? 2 years of lies, I corrected. And yes, they're gone. Along with my savings, my dignity, and my faith in my own judgment. You took everything from me, Daniel. Everything except the one thing you never had, my future. I walked out then, my wedding dress trailing behind me like the ghost of who I used to be. In the hallway, I passed other patients' rooms, glimpses of real tragedies, illness, accidents, death. What happened to me wasn't a tragedy, I realized.
It was a narrow escape.
Lily was waiting in the lobby, having driven over after I'd left with Robert. She took one look at me and wrapped me in a hug. Ready to get out of that dress? She asked.
God, yes.
As we walked to her car, my phone buzzed with more messages. Friends asking if I was okay. Coworkers expressing shock. My boss offering me time off. The world hadn't stopped because my wedding had imploded. Life was moving forward, with or without me. What are you going to do now? Lily asked as she drove us back to my apartment. I thought about it. My savings were gone, given to violent men to protect my family. My reputation was in tatters. My home was full of memories of a relationship that had been a lie from the start. I had nothing left but the truth, ugly as it was. I'm going to start over, I said. Completely. New city, new job, new everything. Running away? No, I said, feeling something shift inside me, some final piece of innocence dying. Running toward whoever I'm supposed to be when I'm not trying to be someone's perfect bride. We drove in silence for a while, the city waking up around us. Somewhere in this city, Daniel was lying in a hospital bed, facing the consequences of his choices. Rebecca was preparing to raise 2 children alone. Margaret was mourning the son she'd raised and the son he'd become. Robert was probably calculating the damage to his reputation. And me? I was sitting in a car in a wedding dress I'd never wear again, heading toward an apartment I'd have to vacate, to pack up a life I'd have to leave behind. But I was free. For the first time in 2 years, maybe for the first time ever, I was completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully free. The morning sun was fully up now, casting everything in gold. It should have been my first morning as a married woman. Instead, it was my first morning as myself, broken but not beaten, deceived but not destroyed. Harper Matthews. Just Harper Matthews. And maybe, finally, that was enough. The apartment felt like a crime scene. Every corner held evidence of a life that had been murdered by truth. I stood in the doorway, finally out of my wedding dress and wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt, watching the movers box up 2 years of lies. It had been 3 days since the wedding. 3 days since my entire world had imploded in front of 200 guests. The internet had been merciless. Someone had posted the video of Margaret's outburst, and it had gone viral. Worst wedding fail ever was trending. I'd become a meme. People had turned my pain into entertainment, adding funny captions to screenshots of my shocked face. This one. Lily held up a framed photo from our trip to Greece last summer. Daniel and I were laughing on a beach in Santorini, looking like the perfect couple. Trash, I said without hesitation. She tossed it into the garbage bag with satisfying force. We'd been doing this for hours, sorting through possessions, dividing what was mine from what was his, what was real from what was tainted by association. My phone rang.
Emma.
How are you holding up? My sister asked. I'm packing. Mom wants to know if you're coming to dinner Sunday. Sunday dinner. As if life could just continue as normal. As if I could sit at my parents' table and make small talk over pot roast when everyone knew what had happened.
I can't, I said.
The movers are coming Monday. I have too much to do. Harper, you can't just run away. I'm not running away. I'm relocating. There's a difference. To Seattle? That's across the country. That's the point. I'd accepted a job offer from a firm in Seattle 2 days ago. They'd reached out after seeing the news of all things. My old law school mentor worked there and thought I might need a fresh start. The irony that my public humiliation had led to a job opportunity wasn't lost on me. What about your job here? Your friends? My job gave me indefinite leave after the partners saw the video. Apparently, having an associate who's internet famous for being lied to isn't great for the firm's image. And my friends. I looked at Lily, who was aggressively throwing Daniel's belongings into boxes marked, "Return TO sender." My real friends will stay in touch. Emma sighed. What about Daniel? What about him? Has he tried to contact you? Every hour. Every single hour since I'd walked out of that hospital room. Daniel had tried to reach me. Calls, texts, emails, even a handwritten letter delivered by courier. I'd ignored them all until this morning, when I'd finally sent a single response. Contact my lawyer. He's not my problem anymore, I told Emma. After I hung up, Lily and I continued packing in companionable silence. She'd taken the week off work to help me, claiming she needed a vacation anyway. We both knew she was really there to make sure I didn't fall apart completely. A knock at the door interrupted us. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. Rebecca stood in the hallway, James beside her, holding a small gift bag. I opened the door. Rebecca, what are you doing here? I'm sorry to just show up, she said, looking uncomfortable. I wanted to. James made something for you. The little boy held up the bag shyly. Daddy said you were sad. I made you a picture to feel better. My heart broke a little. This innocent child, caught in his father's web of lies, trying to comfort a stranger he'd been told was important. Thank you, James, I said, taking the bag. That's very kind of you. Can I use your bathroom? James asked, doing the universal small child dance of urgent need. Of course. Down the hall, first door on the right. As James ran off, Rebecca and I stood awkwardly in the doorway. I know this is weird, she said. But I needed to thank you. In person. Thank me? For what? For not hating me. For not blaming me. For being decent about all of this. You could have made my life hell and you didn't. I looked at this woman. Young, pretty, pregnant, raising Daniel's son alone, and felt a strange kinship. We were both victims of the same con artist. Do you want some tea? I asked. She looked surprised. Really? Really? We sat at my kitchen table, soon to be someone else's kitchen table, while Lily entertained James in the living room with YouTube videos on her phone. How long were you together? I asked. You and Daniel? We weren't really. It was just a few weeks in Miami. Then he left and I found out I was pregnant. When I told him, he said he'd take care of everything, but he needed time to sort things out first. 3 years of sorting things out.
Yeah.
She rubbed her pregnant belly absently. I kept believing him. Every time he'd visit, he'd promise that soon we'd be a real family. He was so convincing. He was good at that. The money helped, Rebecca admitted. I'm not proud of it, but I'm a single mom with no college degree. The money he sent meant I could raise James properly, give him a good life. I told myself it was enough. What changed? I saw your engagement announcement. His mom, Margaret, had been sending me money for months, but I didn't know who she was. Then I saw the announcement with both your names, and I realized the checks were from his mother. That's when I knew he was never leaving you. So you reached out to Margaret? She reached out to me, actually. Said she'd hired someone to investigate where Daniel's money was going. When she found out about James, she came to Miami to meet us. That must have been awkward. Rebecca laughed, but it was sad. She cried when she saw James. Said he looked exactly like Daniel did as a baby. She's been trying to convince Daniel to tell you the truth ever since. Why didn't she just tell me herself? Earlier? She hoped Daniel would do the right thing. She still believed he could be better than he was. Rebecca paused. She loves him, you know. Despite everything, she loves her son. That's why this is killing her. James ran back into the kitchen. Mommy, the lady has a cat video. That's nice, baby. We need to go soon. Actually, I said, surprising myself. Would you like to stay for lunch? I was going to order pizza, and I have way too much food to pack anyway. Rebecca looked at me like I'd suggested something insane. Maybe I had. You want to have lunch with your ex-fiancé's secret baby mama? When she put it like that, it did sound insane. But what about the last week hadn't been insane? Why not? I said. Nothing about this situation is normal. Why pretend otherwise? So we ate pizza together, me, Lily, Rebecca, and James. It should have been awkward, but instead, it was oddly cathartic. Rebecca told me about raising James alone, about Daniel's sporadic visits, about the promises he'd made and broken. I told her about the wedding planning, the lies I believed, the signs I'd missed. He had a locked drawer, I said, in his office. I never questioned it, just accepted that everyone deserves privacy. He had 2 phones, Rebecca countered. Told me one was for work. He said his mother was difficult, that she didn't approve of me. He said you were cold and controlling. We looked at each other and laughed. Actually laughed. It was absurd, the whole situation, and sometimes absurdity demands laughter. What will you do now? I asked her. My sister lives in Portland. She said James, and I can stay with her until the baby comes. After that. She shrugged. I'll figure it out. Single mom of 2 isn't what I planned, but it's better than waiting for someone who's never coming. After they left, Lily looked at me with something like awe. I cannot believe you just had lunch with her. She's not the enemy, I said. She never was. No, but it's still weird. Everything about this is weird. That evening, as we continued packing, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Harper. It was Margaret. I'm sorry to bother you. I wanted to check on you. I'm fine, I said automatically. No, you're not. And that's okay. You don't have to be fine. Something about her voice, the maternal concern in it, made my throat tight. How's Daniel? In rehab. We had him transferred directly from the hospital. He's resistant, but the program is good. 90 days minimum. And Robert? Divorcing me. She said it matter-of-factly, like mentioning the weather. 32 years of marriage, and he's leaving because I embarrassed the family. Though I suspect he's really leaving because I hid money from him. He can't forgive that breach of trust. She laughed bitterly. Ironic, isn't it? Margaret, I'm sorry. Don't be. It's long overdue. I've been sleepwalking through my life for decades, accepting things I shouldn't have, staying quiet when I should have spoken. What happened at your wedding? I'm sorry it hurt you, but I'm not sorry I did it. It woke me up too. Where will you go? I have a sister in Vermont. I'll stay with her while the divorce goes through. After that, who knows? I'm 63 years old and free for the first time in my adult life. It's terrifying and exhilarating. We were quiet for a moment, 2 women on opposite ends of life, both starting over because of the same man's lies. Harper, Margaret said finally, I know Daniel hurt you terribly, but don't let him steal your ability to trust. Don't let him make you hard. How do I trust anyone again after this? You start small. You trust yourself first. Then you trust people who earn it, not people who demand it. And you remember that Daniel's lies don't define your truth. 6 months later, I stood in my Seattle apartment, looking out at the space needle lit up against the evening sky. The one-bedroom apartment was small but mine, decorated with thrift store finds and not a single photo from my life before. My new beginning had a view of the mountains and smelled like the coffee shop downstairs. "You ready?" My coworker Amit stood in my doorway, dressed for the firm's holiday party. Almost. I grabbed my coat, a practical rain jacket, so different from the designer pieces that had filled my old closet. The party was at a restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. I'd been dreading it all week, knowing there would be questions. There were always questions when people found out who I was. The wedding video had millions of views now. I'd become an unwilling symbol of betrayal, a cautionary tale told at bachelorette parties. "So," Amit said as we walked, "fair warning. There's someone at the party who wants to meet you. Please tell me it's not another journalist." "No, nothing like that. It's actually Harper." I turned at the familiar voice. David Chin stood there, looking exactly as he had in law school, minus the stressed-out student aura. We'd dated briefly our first year, before deciding we were better as friends. He'd moved to Seattle after graduation, and we'd lost touch. "David, what are you doing here?" "I work at Preston and Associates. We're co-counsel on the Morrison case with your firm." He smiled, that same easy smile I remembered. "I heard you'd moved to Seattle. I've been hoping to run into you. And you just happened to be at our holiday party?" "Amit might have mentioned you'd be here," he admitted. "I wanted to see how you were doing. After everything." Of course he knew. Everyone knew. "I'm fine," I said, the automatic response I'd perfected over the last 6 months. "No, really. How are you?" I looked at him, this person who'd known me before Daniel, before the lies, before I became internet famous for the worst day of my life. "I'm surviving," I said honestly. "Some days are better than others. Do you want to get some air? Party's pretty stuffy anyway." We walked along the waterfront, the December air cold and damp. David didn't push, didn't ask questions, just walked beside me in comfortable silence. "I saw the video," he said finally. "I'm sorry that happened to you." Everyone saw the video.
True.
But not everyone knew you before. Not everyone knows that the Harper in that video, in that dress, looking so shocked and hurt, that's not who you really are. Isn't it? I was naive enough to believe him, blind enough to miss all the signs. You were in love. That doesn't make you naive. It makes you human. We stopped at a bench overlooking the water. The city lights reflected on the bay, beautiful and distant. "I got an email from him last week," I said. "Daniel. From rehab." David waited. He wanted to apologize. Said he's been working through his issues, understanding his patterns. His therapist thought it would be good for him to reach out, make amends. Did you respond?
No.
What would I say? "Thanks for the apology. Hope rehab is going well. Glad you're working on yourself after destroying my life." "Your life doesn't look destroyed from where I'm sitting." I looked at him. "You don't know what I lost. I know what you gained. Freedom from someone who didn't deserve you. A fresh start in a great city. A job at one of the best firms in Seattle. The chance to rebuild on your own terms." My phone buzzed. Lily, sending pictures from her company's holiday party back home. She was wearing an elf costume and making ridiculous faces. I smiled despite myself. "See," David said. "Not everything from before was a lie. Your friendship with her is real. Your career is real. Your strength is real. When did you become so wise?" "Therapy. Lots and lots of therapy." He grinned. "Turns out law school anxiety doesn't just go away with graduation." We walked back to the party together. Inside, the firm's partners were making speeches about the year's successes. My boss mentioned the big win I'd had on the Patterson case, and people applauded. For a moment, I wasn't the girl from the wedding video. I was just Harper Matthews, good lawyer, valued colleague. Later, as the party wound down, David found me again. "I know this might be too soon," he said, "but would you like to get coffee sometime?"
Just coffee.
Just catching up. I thought about Margaret's words about learning to trust again, starting small. Coffee sounds nice. Christmas came and went quietly. I flew home for 2 days, enduring the pitying looks from extended family and the well-meaning but painful questions. Emma was pregnant, glowing with happiness, and I was genuinely happy for her even as it highlighted my own derailed plans. "Any news about Daniel?" my mother asked when we were alone in the kitchen. "He's still in rehab. 90 days turned into 6 months. Margaret says he's doing better." "You talk to Margaret?" "She calls sometimes. We have a strange friendship, I guess. Bonded by trauma." "And the other woman? Rebecca?" "She had the baby. A girl, like she said. Named her Emma, actually. She sent me a picture." My mother's eyes widened. "She sent you a picture of Daniel's baby?" "We text occasionally. She's doing well in Portland. Her sister helps with the kids." "Harper, that's unusual." "Nothing about this situation is usual, Mom." New Year's Eve, I stood on the roof of my apartment building with some neighbors, watching fireworks over the Space Needle. At midnight, my phone flooded with messages. One stood out. "This year you learned you're stronger than you knew. Next year you'll learn you're capable of more than you imagined. Margaret." She was right. I had survived what should have destroyed me. I'd rebuilt from nothing. I'd learned to be alone without being lonely. David and I had been having coffee every week. Just coffee, just talking. He knew all my baggage, had seen the video, had heard the whole story, and still showed up every Thursday at the same cafe, ready to listen or distract as needed. "I'm not ready for anything more," I told him the third week. "I know," he'd said. "I'm just happy to have my friend back." In February, a package arrived at my office. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside was my grandmother's engagement ring, the one I'd thrown at Daniel at the hospital. There was a note. "This belongs to you. It was never mine to give.
D."
I held the ring up to the light. It was beautiful, Art Deco platinum with a small but perfect diamond. I'd loved it when Daniel had proposed with it, claiming it had been his grandmother's. Another lie. Margaret had told me he'd bought it from an estate sale and made up the story. But the ring itself wasn't a lie. It was just a ring, innocent of the fiction attached to it. I put it in my jewelry box, not to wear, but to remember. To remember that beautiful things can come from ugly situations. That truth can be found in the midst of lies. That sometimes the real gift is discovering what's genuine before it's too late. March brought unexpected news. Robert Sinclair had died of a heart attack. Margaret called, crying. "I know I shouldn't be sad," she said. "He was leaving me. He was cold and controlling and enabled Daniel's worst qualities. But 32 years. You can't just erase 32 years." I flew back for the funeral, standing in the back of the church where I should have been married. Daniel was there, out of rehab, looking healthier but hollow. He saw me but didn't approach. The restraining order I'd filed ensured that. After the service, Margaret found me. "Thank you for coming." "Of course." "Daniel's doing better. The rehab helped. He's working at a nonprofit now, helping gambling addicts. Court-ordered community service, but he seems committed to it." "That's good." "He wanted me to tell you something." I tensed. "He said to tell you that you were right. What he felt wasn't love. He's learning what real love is, starting with learning to love himself without lies." "I hope he succeeds," I said and meant it. Back in Seattle, life continued. I won a major case. David and I went from coffee to dinner, taking things slowly, building on a foundation of friendship and honesty. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and rain. One day in April, I was having lunch with a client when someone approached our table. "Excuse me, are you Harper Matthews?" I braced myself for another person who recognized me from the video. "Yes. I wanted to thank you." The woman was young, maybe 25. "I was supposed to get married last month. The night before, I couldn't shake this feeling something was wrong. I watched your video, not to laugh, but because something about your story resonated with me. It gave me courage to dig deeper. I found out my fiancé was cheating. The wedding was called off." "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Your story, as painful as it was, helped me see the truth in my own life. I wanted to thank you for that." After she left, I sat there stunned. My humiliation, My pain, broadcast to millions, had helped someone. The worst day of my life had prevented someone else's worst day. That evening, I stood in my apartment looking at the sunset over Puget Sound. My phone rang, Lily, calling for our weekly check-in. "How are you really?" she asked, our standard opening.
Good, I said.
Actually good. Not pretending, not surviving, but good. Yeah. I had lunch with someone today, who thanked me for the video. Said it saved her from marrying a cheater.
Wow.
That's wow. I've been thinking, I said. Maybe I should write about it. The whole story. Not for sympathy or revenge, but to help others see the signs I missed. To show that surviving betrayal is possible. A book. Maybe.
Or a blog.
Something. I'm tired of other people controlling my narrative. I think that's brilliant. That night, I opened my laptop and began typing. I was walking down the aisle when my fiancé's mother yelled the truth. That stopped me cold. In that moment, my perfect wedding became a perfect disaster. But here's what the viral video doesn't show: how that disaster became my salvation. I wrote for hours, telling the whole story. The lies, the debts, the secret family, but also the recovery, the friendships forged in crisis, the strength found in vulnerability. I wrote about Margaret, finding her voice after decades of silence. About Rebecca, raising her children with dignity despite being labeled the other woman. About myself, learning that rock bottom can be a foundation to build upon. When I finally stopped typing, it was dawn. Another new day in my new life. I made coffee and sat by my window, watching the city wake up. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Breakfast?"
I am buying.
I smiled and typed back, "Yes." Such a simple word, but it felt revolutionary. Yes to breakfast. Yes to moving forward. Yes to trust, tentatively offered and carefully rebuilt. Yes to a life that looked nothing like I'd planned but was becoming something better. Honest, genuine, mine. I thought about that moment at the altar, when Margaret had stood up and shouted the truth. It had felt like the end of everything. But it wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. The beginning of my real story. The one where the bride doesn't get the groom, but she gets something better, herself, untangled from lies, undefined by someone else's deceptions, unafraid of the truth. Looking back now, from the safety of distance and healing, I could see it clearly. Would I rather live with a painful truth or a beautiful lie? The answer was obvious. The truth, painful as it was, had set me free. And freedom, I'd learned, was worth more than any wedding, any relationship built on deception, any happily ever after that required me to close my eyes to reality. I was Harper Matthews. Not Harper Sinclair. Never Harper Sinclair. And that was exactly who I was meant to be. If you had to choose between living with a beautiful lie or facing a devastating truth, which would you choose? And would you have the courage to thank the person who exposed it? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe to hear more stories about the moments that shatter us and the strength we find in the pieces.